Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
A whole book on breastfeeding. And I read that when you have a breast infection, the best thing you can do is breastfeed. It doesn't hurt the baby. You just take penicillin for the infection and keep nursing. But these guys thought breastfeeding was barbaric, so they didn't want me breastfeeding. They thought it was bad for you.
Well,
Anyway.
I mean, they're southern idiots, so what do you expect?
Exactly. Damn patriarchs. And Louisiana has always been one of the worst states in the country for patriarchy. And that time, I think they still had the Napoleonic code for everything, where women are nothing more than property. And they don't have a right to anything. But that changed later, I believe. But they're still really barbaric and behind the rest of the country on a lot of stuff. So, and the hospital I went to, there was a brand new hospital, women's hospital, that focused mostly on women and pregnancy and delivery and all of that stuff. But they were so behind the times. And I don't think it was a hospital. I think it was our doctors at that stupid clinic. And each one of those doctors delivered one of you. Dr. Planche delivered you. The other doctor, whose name I can't remember, delivered Greg, and then the other doctor, Dr. Lamb, delivered Christy. And of the three, Dr. Lamb was the best, but he was also the head of the department at that clinic. So anyway, where was I?
The book you gave me.
So
that's Randy. That's later on, but so anyway, there was all that. And one thing I didn't tell you, I don't remember which, I think it was when I was pregnant with you, because I was wearing temple garments. I was married in the temple. And you're supposed to, before you go to the doctor, the advice we were given then, I don't know what it is now, but you were supposed to change out of your temple garments and wear regular underwear when you...
Something like that, when you're going to be exposed.
I know, like when you go to the gym.
I forgot and wore my temple garments, and the nurse thought that was hilarious. She was like, and she went out and got everybody in the office to come in and laugh at my underwear. And of course, I was mortified because they were ridiculing something that to me at the time was sacred. And they all left, and then eventually... I think she finally realized how upset I was and asked me about it. And then I explained to her that, it's a covenant, a mark of our covenant with God and blah, blah, blah. And comparing it to Jewish prayer shawls and all of those kinds of things. And explaining that it's, it's a religious thing and it's a mark of our beliefs. And so, she was nice after that, but anyway, that was a bad experience. Anyway, then what? So there was after you were born, and you liked bottle feeding because you could suck the food down a lot faster, and you were a very hungry baby because you were growing so fast. Look how tall you are now. You were growing really fast. So anyway. You weren't that heavy when you were born. All of you were under 8 pounds, just under 8 pounds. I think Jenny was the smallest, and she was like 7'13". You and Greg were both almost 8 pounds, but not quite. But you were long. So you were like 21 something inches when you were born, both of you. And all of you were kind of long, none of you were tiny. But none of you were too big, so I didn't have problems with that. But you got plump really fast. But the milk wasn't enough, even the Similac wasn't enough, the baby formula. So the doctor suggested we feed you rice cereal, which now they say that's a bad thing. It's mostly, I think Rochelle mentioned that on something. somebody posted something about rice and how it has pesticides in it and all kinds of stuff. And she said, I think it was her who, no, it wasn't. I think it was my friend, Barbara Waddy Carlton, who said that they used to recommend rice cereal to babies in the 70s to help them sleep through the night. And they, at the time, they came out with these little feeders that were like, kind of like hypodermics for food. You had a nipple on one side, and it was this thing that was maybe 2 inches around with a plunger in it, and you'd fill that with the rice cereal, and you would just suck that down, and you got plump. Well, Fosha was determined that you were fat. That baby's too fat. You need to put that baby on a diet. I was like, he's growing really fast. I was always blowing Fosha and her bullshit off. And this was one of the examples, her giving me shit about you being too fat. You were plump. You were a plump baby. But, I remember women in Baton Rouge, the older women who just made a big fuss over you. You were a big deal. There hadn't been a baby in that ward in a long time. And that's the word that I mentioned, when you would cry or something, when one of the children would cry, the whole congregation would start rocking. All the women would start rocking in place as if they were quieting a baby. It just was instinct. It was pretty funny. But I remember one of the women telling me, yeah, when my children were young, they used to have us give the babies sweetened condensed milk. Do you know what sweetened condensed milk is? It's really thick milk with about a ton of corn syrup in it. It's very high calorie, and I used to use it to make desserts and things. So, she was like, and she was regretful. And they used to get so nice and plump, and they were, she felt like it made nice. Well, I thought, well, that's why you're also freaking fat, because you grew up. The first few years you're drinking this nothing but a little bit of milk protein with a whole lot of corn syrup, and then after that you're addicted to sugar. Although they were also addicted to peppers down there, spice. They really like spice. I remember women saying, oh, I like, eating the jambalaya or whatever. Oh, I like it until it makes me cry. I like it so hot it makes me cry. I couldn't eat that hot. That was just too much for me. But anyway, that's one thing I didn't mention when we pulled into Baton Rouge when we first moved there. Everywhere we saw jambalaya, it was like a fundraiser, jambalaya cookout or whatever. And we were like, what the heck is jambalaya? Or red beans and rice. And we were both like, that's awfully starchy, isn't it? Well, we became very addicted to jambalaya and red beans and rice. And I still like red beans and rice. Jambalaya usually has some kind of critter in it. And I have made vegetarian jambalaya, but it's not really jambalaya. It has everything down there has meat or fish in it. But boy, they had good food. I loved, Creole cooking, Cajun cooking when we lived there.
Yeah, I've been there. It's really good.
Yeah, so I remember it as good food, and I loved the people there, even though some of them had severe race issues. This is one of the places I lived. I think I told you that I remember going into the stores and people would, black people who worked in the stores would be a little standoffish with the white person coming in the store. But the minute I would open my mouth and start talking, you could see the change come over. Oh, you're not from around here. You must be okay. And I remember thinking, oh, you just have no idea. People are racist everywhere. It's not just here in Louisiana. It's kind of sad, but it was nice that they treated me well, But I understand why they had problems because, boy, they had race problems down there. They had severe race problems when we lived there. And I think I told you the ward almost split over my husband teaching that black people would one day get the priesthood, and then when they did, they lost a lot of white members. Racism, a problem. Otherwise, really nice people, but racist as hell. Anyway, And gossipy, boy. Oh, boy, did they like their gossip. So anyway, let's see. You were a really good-natured baby. You were really easygoing. Women in the church kept telling me, you need a real baby. That's not a real baby. Because you were just really easygoing. You were able to turn really early. Roll over. You were able to flop from your tummy to your back like almost as soon, very quickly within the first week after we brought you home, and then the other way very soon after that. So you would roll everywhere, and we didn't have a playpen. We didn't have a playpen until we had Christy, because I felt like it was better for you to get around and explore. And when your father and I carried you around, we would carry you all of you, so you could see out and see things rather than carrying you so you can't see. We felt it was good for you to see things and react to things. And you were curious about everything. You wanted to get around and see everything. So we'd take you to church, and you exhausted me. You know, before you were a month old, you exhausted me because we'd put you on a blanket on the floor, and we'd sit in the back of church, and you would just roll off. And I was constantly getting up and picking you up and bringing you back because you would just roll. And you did that until you got strong enough to walk around the furniture. Now, we had a couple of people for baby presents gave us these little things with wheels that you see babies in. And they've since said that's really bad for your legs when they're developing. But in your case, I think you needed the strength because you had the motor control issues and stuff. But we'd put you in this little thing, and, you know, when you were old enough to sit up, and you would just run all over the place in that thing. It was amazing how fast you could go in that thing. Really soon after you were old enough to first start using it. So your legs developed really fast, and you were growing really fast. So by the time you were 1, you were the size of many 2-year-olds. And you only crawled for about a week, which is not good. Didn't know at the time. Babies need to go through their stages. And you only crawled for about a week. You went straight from, either being in those little things and scooting around or rolling to walking around the furniture. And then by the time you were 8 years old,
You mean 8
On
months
the
old?
front door, which was
You mean 8 months
terrifying.
old?
I can't hear you. What?
You mean 8 months old? You said 8 years old.
8 months. Yes, 8 months.
8 months. Yes, 8 months. By the time you were 8 months old, you were tall enough and strong enough to walk to the front door and open the front door. So we had to keep the front door, we had to get little, they had these doorknob covers to keep you from getting out, because otherwise you get out. And I have to chase you down before you were even a year old. But you didn't really talk. You weren't really interested in talking. I think your first word was no.
Just like Alda.
We were at, I think we were visiting Fosha and Artel, and you got put in a playpen to keep you from running around all over the place, and you just stood in the playpen yelling, no, 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 no. But you just didn't really talk. That was not the thing you were. I have this theory that babies have certain focus. They develop certain focuses. Those are the things they're most interested in. And yours was getting around and looking at everything and getting into everything. And when Greg was born, when you were 11 and a half months old, and that's a different story, because by then the doctors had me terrified. That experience with the infection and the 2 episiotomies and all that stuff scared the living daylights out of me. So I didn't argue with them when they said they were going to put me to sleep. And when I had Greg, I didn't have the constipation problems and stuff. I drank juice and stuff, I think, to keep me not as bad. They still give you every woman who came in there got an enema. The fact that I had been badly impacted just made it worse. So, but when I had Greg, your dad was freaking out. He freaked out both times. When you were born and when Greg was born. And he was driving. I remember him driving when I was like a crazy person a little bit. I was like, okay, calm down. It's okay. Everything's under control. You don't have to freak out. But when I was in there, he was in the room with me while I was in contractions with Greg. And, at a certain point, I finally said, he kept playing with my hand. He was like, I don't know how to explain it. You know how where your wrist and your hand join? He was flipping my hand up and down, among other things. And he was so nervous. He was driving me crazy. And finally, and you don't want to mess with
They're dangerous.
in labor. They're dangerous. So,
Jello Bob may be, in retrospect, mostly disgraced, but his bit about pulling somebody's lip up over their head is probably still an accurate description.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. So I'm, having a baby, and your father's doing these crazy things and driving me crazy. And I finally asked for the Twilight, and he said, "Are you sure? Are you that far along?" I said, "No, but I'm about to kill you." So for your protection, I would advise you to leave the room right now. Because if you don't leave, I'm going to kill you. You're driving me nuts. I've got enough to deal with. I don't need you being nervous and weird. So he left. I got the Twilight, and then, you wake up with a Greg. And and when they brought him to me, well, to begin with, it took me when I woke up from the gas, because of everything that had happened with you when you were born, it wasn't as bad. Your dad actually spent the night in my room after Greg was born, which he didn't do when you were born. He went home and got some sleep. When Greg was born, the anesthetic, I was so goofy from the anesthetic that I was like babbling, and I was ranting that I couldn't see the clock. What time is it? I can't see the clock. Why can't I see the clock? And at one point I was telling him, he said something about the bishop and Edna will be by later, and I said, no, the bishop's not coming.
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, available in many markets, including at Amazon.com. Copyright 2018, Red Anvil Amalgamated, LLC.
To fight the forces of evil!